She stood alone on the sidewalk, drenched from head to toe, hugging her arms to stay warm. Cars drove by, people rushed past, yet no one slowed down. Not even for a second. Her shoes were soaked, her clothes were thin, and the world seemed to ignore her pain. But in that cold, silent rain, fate was about to send someone her way. One stranger, one coat, and one moment that would change everything. The afternoon sky was dark, though it was only 3 o'clock. Heavy clouds gathered above the small town as the wind whispered warnings of rain. On the sidewalk near a closed bus stop stood a girl named Aisha, barely 15, but carrying the weight of someone much older. Her clothes were worn out, the faded blue dress was too thin for weather like this, and her sandals had cracks that let water through whenever she stepped in a puddle. Aisha lived with her mother in a one-room house at the edge of town. Her father had left years ago, leaving behind promises that had dissolved long before the rain clouds ever formed. Her mother cleaned houses to earn enough for food, and Aisha often skipped meals so her younger brother wouldn't go hungry. That day, she had left home early to drop off some old books someone had given her. She had dreams of studying, of doing more than just surviving, but life didn't always listen to dreams. With no umbrella and no coat, she walked slowly toward the bus stop, hoping to catch a cheap ride home before the storm began. Her hair was tied loosely, strands sticking to her forehead with sweat and dust. Her hands were cold despite the air still being warm. She had been standing there for almost an hour, waiting, hoping, watching the road in both directions. The air suddenly shifted, and the first few drops of rain touched her skin like tiny shocks of ice. She looked up, blinking as the clouds opened wider. Within moments, the sky poured like it had been holding back for too long. People who had been nearby rushed away, shielding themselves with bags, jackets, or newspapers. The bus never arrived. The small station roof leaked, dripping water onto the single bench inside. Aisha stepped back slightly, pressing herself against the wall to avoid the heaviest of the rain, but the water splashed everywhere. Her thin dress clung to her body, and her feet were already wet. Her hands tightened around the straps of the old cloth bag she carried. Inside it were 2 notebooks wrapped in plastic and a pencil case with half-used pencils. Cars passed by, their tires splashing water onto the street. Some drivers looked in her direction, but quickly turned away, pretending not to see. Others didn't notice her at all. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, unsure if the wetness was from the rain or her tears. She didn't want to cry, but the cold was getting sharper, and the loneliness felt heavier with every minute. She thought of walking home, but it was too far, and the road was already flooding in places. She tried to stay calm and silent. She was used to being unseen, unheard, unnoticed. But for the first time in a long while, standing alone under that roaring sky, she wished anyone, would just stop and ask if she was okay. But no one did. The rain only grew stronger. The wind blew sideways, making it impossible to stay dry no matter where she stood. The sky rumbled as thunder cracked in the distance. Aisha's fingers were turning pale from the cold, and her lips trembled as she tried to keep herself warm by pressing her arms close to her body. A group of teenagers passed by the bus stop, laughing and running toward a nearby cafe. One of them glanced at her and whispered something to the others. They all looked at Aisha briefly, but instead of helping, they kept running, giggling as if her presence was a part of the scenery they found strange but unimportant. Minutes dragged by like hours. Water dripped from her hair onto her cheeks. Her sandals were soaked, her toes numb. A large black car slowed down near the sidewalk, and for a fleeting moment her heart lifted. Maybe someone would help. But the car only waited for the traffic light to change. The driver, a well-dressed woman holding a coffee cup, looked at Aisha through the window, then raised the glass higher and sipped, without a word, without a gesture. Aisha lowered her gaze, ashamed for hoping. She remembered her mother telling her that some days were just harder than others, and that patience was a kind of strength, but patience didn't keep away the cold. It didn't dry her clothes or stop the rain from beating against her skin. A man with an umbrella approached the shelter, talking loudly on his phone. He stood near the bench, careful not to get his shoes wet. He glanced at Aisha but quickly looked away and continued his conversation about a business meeting. When a gust of wind blew rain onto his jacket, he scowled at the sky and left in frustration, leaving her alone again. Aisha thought of her little brother, who would be waiting for her at home. She had promised she would return before dark. She thought of her mother, who would worry if she was late. The guilt mixed with fear, and for the first time, she wrapped her arms around herself not just to stay warm, but to hold together whatever strength she had left. Her breathing grew heavier as a shiver ran through her body. She tried to rub her arms to create some warmth, but it didn't help. The world looked blurry through the curtain of rain. The road, the buildings, the trees. All of it seemed distant and uncaring. Another car passed by, splashing water that landed near her feet. She stepped back, startled, her heart sinking deeper. The sky roared again, and lightning flashed across the clouds. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer not for the rain to stop, but for someone to notice her before she collapsed from exhaustion. But the sidewalk remained empty. The world continued moving, busy and blind, as she stood shivering in silence, unsure how much longer she could endure. Just when the wind felt too strong and her legs too weak, a pair of footsteps approached. Not hurried, not careless, but steady. Aisha didn't look up at first. Experience had taught her not to expect much from strangers. A voice, gentle and calm, cut through the sound of rain. "Are you okay?" Her eyes opened slowly, unsure if she had imagined it. Standing a few steps away was a man in his 30s, holding a large umbrella. His clothes were slightly damp around the edges, but he didn't seem bothered by it. His eyes held warmth, not pity or discomfort, just concern. Aisha tried to speak, but her voice trembled. She nodded faintly, though everything about her suggested the opposite. The man stepped closer without invading her space. "You're freezing. How long have you been standing here?" She shrugged, not trusting her voice to stay steady. The man glanced at the sky, then at the road, then back at her soaked clothes and shaking hands. Without hesitation, he slipped off his coat, a thick, dark one that looked warm and dry, and gently draped it over her shoulders. The sudden warmth stunned her. She gripped the edges of the coat, holding it close as if afraid it would disappear. The fabric was soft, heavy, and comforting, and she could no longer hide the tears that escaped her eyes. The man held the umbrella above both of them. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Aisha." She whispered. He smiled. "I'm Imran. Do you live nearby?" She nodded again, pointing in the direction of her neighborhood. Imran glanced at the flooded road and then at the empty bus lane. "No bus is coming in this weather." He said gently, "Come on, I'll walk you home." Aisha hesitated, unsure if she should trust him, but something in his voice and eyes reassured her. He wasn't just being kind out of duty. He genuinely cared. They walked slowly under the umbrella, his coat still wrapped around her. The rain continued to fall, but suddenly it didn't feel as harsh. Every step felt safer than the one before. Along the way, he didn't ask her uncomfortable questions. He didn't judge her clothes, her silence, or her tears. He simply walked beside her, steady and patient. As they neared her house, she pointed to the small path leading to the worn wooden door. Imran stopped and smiled. "Keep the coat," he said. "You need it more than I do." Aisha shook her head, overwhelmed. "I can't." "You can," he said kindly, "and you should." For the first time that day, she smiled, small, shy, but real. She whispered, "Thank you." Imran nodded once, his expression gentle. Then he turned and walked away into the rain, without waiting for praise, without asking for anything in return. Aisha stood at her doorway, wrapped in the coat, watching him disappear down the road. The world no longer felt as cold as it had before. One act had changed the way the sky looked, the way the ground felt beneath her feet, and the way her heart beat inside her chest. She stepped inside her home with warmth, not just around her body, but within her soul. Kindness doesn't always come with noise. It often arrives quietly, like a coat in the rain. One moment of care can warm a heart long after the storm has passed. Even when the world seems too busy to notice, there are people who still see. A small act can change someone's day, someone's life, someone's hope. Be that moment, be that coat in someone's rain.